Hello boys and girls, and welcome back to another lesson about how we can identify lessons from our books. And today this strategy is called What Can Characters Teach Us? So sometimes we find people in our lives who we look up to, and maybe those people show courage, or those people are generous even when they don't have that much to give. Sometimes those people are patient during times when you might get easily frustrated. And these people that we look up to are like role models, and they can inspire us to be better and to do better. And the characters in our books can do the same thing. So just like people, they have traits, and we've talked a lot about different character traits based on what characters say and do. And we can look at the situations or the events where these certain traits show up and think about what those traits can teach us. So for example, in our book Hoot that we read a couple weeks ago, I was thinking about our main character, Roy. And he did a lot of really cool things that give us some really strong character traits to describe him. So for example, one thing that he did that really stood out to me was that he brought the owls crickets. Down at the construction site. Okay, so he brought the owls crickets, and I thought this was really caring of him. I think this really pointed out how he's a caring person. Okay, that would be one of his character traits. All right, another thing that he did was that he told his dad about the owl dens. So I'm going to write that over here. Told his dad about the owl dens, even when he was really conflicted about whether or not he should, because he was worried about how that would affect Mullet Fingers and his secret hiding. So he told his dad about the dens, and that was pretty risky because he wasn't sure if that would get Mullet Fingers in trouble. Another thing Roy did that really stood out to me was that he stood up to Chuck Muckle. Stood up to Chuck Muckle, and remember, he was the vice president of the Mother Paula's company. And he stood up to Chuck Muckle at that groundbreaking ceremony, which was incredibly brave. Okay, so notice I have my character in the middle of my paper. I'm identifying different things that our character did, and I'm attaching a trait to them. So Roy brought the owls crickets. That showed that he was really caring. Roy also told his dad about the owl dens, which was pretty risky. We could definitely agree that Roy is a risk taker. Roy also stood up to Chuck Muckle at the groundbreaking ceremony, which tells us that Roy is pretty brave. And another thing that Roy did was that he cared for Mullet Fingers. When he got bit and he was all infected. Okay. Remember how he told the emergency center that Mullet Fingers' name was Roy. That was pretty, I would say, considerate of Roy to do. It was also pretty brave of him, pretty risky, and caring. But I'm going to go with considerate. Okay. So we look at all of these things that Roy did, and there are plenty more, but I'm just going to stick with these four. And we think about what kind of traits we could use to describe those actions, which then describe Roy. And we think about what can our character Roy teach us? He did all these great, brave, caring, considerate things. What can we learn from him? So we think about it, and we write about it. I'm going to start with, of course, Roy. Roy taught me a big takeaway from Hoot. I would say that Roy taught me you should always stand up for what you think is right. Now, it may not always be easy, and you might be conflicted, like a lot of the times that Roy was, but I think that we can agree that Roy taught us you should always stand up for what you think is right. And of course, now that we're coming towards the end of 3rd grade, we know that we need to lift the level of our thinking and take it one step further. So turn those brains on high and let's think. I think this because, using details from the text, Roy did everything he could even if it was difficult to save those owls. And going back to what those specific things that he did do, bringing the owls crickets, standing up to Chuck Muckle, telling his dad about the owl dens, and caring for Mullet Fingers when he got bit. Roy did everything he could, even if it was difficult to save those owls, such as standing up to Chuck Muckle at the ground breaking ceremony. That was so brave of him. I don't know if I could have done that. But I think we can agree that that's something that we can learn from Roy, and we could strive to be more like Roy. So looking at what we wrote, Roy taught me you should always stand up for what you think is right. I think this because Roy did everything he could, even if it was difficult, to save those owls, such as standing up to Chuck Muckle at the groundbreaking ceremony. Wow, that was so brave. Okay, friends, so what you're going to do is you're going to practice the same thing. You are going to practice making this type of little organizer, thinking about the different things that your main character does, and you can either use Peter or Fudge. I would probably suggest using Peter, or try it with a character from your own independent book. Okay, so you want to put that character right in the middle of your paper. Start listing some things that they did. In this case, I listed some really great things that Roy did. And then you think, what can this character teach me? In this case, Roy taught me you should always stand up for what you think is right. And that sounds like a lesson, doesn't it? And I used a specific detail from the text when I lifted and raised my thinking to support my lesson. Okay, so I'm going to give you some steps. Let's go down here. So, step 1. You're going to find a spot or spots where the character shows a good trait, such as being caring or brave or considerate. Okay, those are just some examples. Step 2. Ask yourself, how would you describe how the character is acting? How would you describe how the character is acting? And in this case, that would be your traits. they're acting caring, they're acting risky, they're acting considerately. And step 3. What can the character teach you? In our example, Roy taught us that you should always stand up for what you think is right. And that's really inspiring. It makes me want to be more like Roy. All right, friends, so going through those steps again. Step 1, find a spot where the character shows a good trait. Brought the owls crickets, told his dad about the owl den, stood up to Chuck Muckle. Step 2, how would you describe how the character is acting? He was acting caring, he was acting risky, he was acting brave, considerate. In step 3, what can the character teach you? Roy taught me you should always stand up for what you think is right. And I think this because Roy did everything he could, even if it was difficult to save those owls, such as standing up to Chuck Muckle at the groundbreaking ceremony. So you have a template attached to your outline, and it will be in Google Classroom as well. Before you complete that template, which looks exactly like this, you're going to have to list those things that your character did and some possible traits. All right? And then you can start writing about the lesson. All right, friends. So I hope you enjoyed these lessons on lessons, and I wish you well. Can't wait to see your hard work.